America's most vital liberties are under attack. Find out how and what you can do about it on today's Truths That Transform. Hello, I'm Rob Pacienza, and welcome to a special presentation from our powerful new documentary, Attack on the Constitution. When our founders gave us the Constitution, they weren't creating freedom out of thin air. They were securing liberties that had already been given by God. They understood that rights are not granted by government, they are endowed by our Creator. That's why John Adams warned that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. Without virtue, it collapses. Today, those very foundations are under assault.
Where did freedom come from? All the basic foundational ideas of America come from the scriptures and the Christian faith. The notion of covenant is biblical and became the notion of constitution.
I've never seen anything like the attack on our Constitution. Our First Amendment rights are under attack. And we know that the First Amendment protects freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. And this freedom of religion that's being attacked the most is being directed at Christians as opposed to people of other religions.
America's founders took seriously the biblical command to stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free. Only Christianity can be the basis for our freedom. That's why the rights guaranteed in our Constitution are often the target for attack. In his 1958 book, The Naked Communist, author Cleon Skousen lists current communist goals, which include replace religion, eliminate prayer, and discredit the American Constitution and the Founding Fathers.
If we look at America in 1963, and look at America today, what do we see? And I think we see the implementation of those communist goals. And yes, it's cultural Marxism, and it's all about destroying our society.
You go back to Lenin, he said it's all about power. You do whatever you can until you're in charge, because power is what makes the world what it is. And so you use any means necessary. Yeah, you can do it by getting rid of the Constitution or weakening the Constitution or lying about the Constitution. Get away from Republican forms of government until we can take over. And then we're going to have our way. That's always been the premise.
For years, Christian business owners have been targeted by radical LGBTQ activists.
As a follower of Jesus Christ, I believe that the Bible teaches that a wedding marriage is between a man and a woman. While I would gladly serve them anything else, I couldn't create a cake, in this case, create a cake that would imply my participation in that.
Despite a Supreme Court ruling in favor of Masterpiece Cake Shop, which vindicated Jack Phillips' right to live and work consistently with his religious beliefs, he was targeted with 2 more court battles. The Supreme Court affirmed that Lori Smith has First Amendment protection when designing websites, and that the government cannot compel her to express messages she does not agree with.
I want to create freely and create messages that glorify and honor God. And for me, this means designing for weddings and telling the story of a couple through God's lens of marriage.
We have seen record numbers of people in the workplace having to file Title VII claims for lack of religious accommodation in the attempt to purge people of faith from the workplace, not because of their job performance, but because of their religious convictions.
Far-left activists are weaponizing anti-discrimination laws to try to create a clash between religious freedom and gender identity.
Liam Morrison, who wore a t-shirt to school up in Massachusetts, and the t-shirt said there are only 2 genders. So simply a t-shirt that stated the truth of how God created us, and for that he was disciplined by his school district in violation of his First Amendment rights.
We cannot ignore the fact that we have had a very tremendous increase in the number of cases, in the number of people being harassed because of their faith on multi-dimensions. When the FACE Act was adopted, it was there to protect churches from vandalism and attack, as well as abortion clinics. It was sort of a compromise piece of legislation. During this last administration, it was being explicitly used for a witch hunt to go after pastors, ministers, people who have a heart for the preborn.
Federal, state, and local governments target pro-life individuals and organizations. The FACE Act, which stands for Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, was used by the Biden Department of Justice to prosecute and jail 23 pro-life advocates, one of whom was a survivor of the Holocaust. Federal and local agencies surrounded the home of pro-life father Mark Houck to arrest him in front of his wife and 7 children.
It was 20 plus federal agents and PA state troopers and Philadelphia PD and Bucks County sheriffs, 10 marked and unmarked units on my property. They all had M16 guns or pistols drawn at me. SWAT guys at the back door, all with M16 guns pointed at my little children.
This show of excessive force was part of a record increase in Department of Justice prosecutions against pro-lifers under the Biden administration. Later, Mark Houck was acquitted of all charges.
They broke multiple amendments, Fourth Amendment in particular, wrongful search and seizure of my home, and they came with no warrant in hand, which is against their own laws, their own rules, and of course First Amendment rights being violated, me publicly expressing how I felt about this issue with my son on the streets. But once they break the Constitution, you have to sue them because you have to hold them accountable. Even if you lose, you still have to do it.
So far, the Houck family's lawsuit against the Justice Department has been blocked by the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. And what happened to the 23 pro-lifers unjustly prosecuted and imprisoned by the Biden administration? Well, they were pardoned by President Donald Trump in January of 2025.
We can see issues like the sanctity of life, sexual ethics, the nature of marriage. All of these things are on the line.
The forces that want to push the church out of the public square, they're not going to stop.
So a distinctive, faithful, thoughtful Christian voice today is absolutely critical. Of course, above all, to be faithful to Jesus, but also for the integrity of the Republic, because America's very, very close to a tipping point that is fatal.
Religious liberty is the cornerstone of our freedoms, enshrined as the first right in the Bill of Rights. It's the fountain from which all other rights flow. Yet, for the past 80 years, American courts, nudged by groups like the ACLU, turned this upside down, stifling religious expression in public life and speeding us down a secular road. But today, that freedom is being reclaimed, thanks to courageous Americans standing up for their beliefs. One such person is Coach Joe Kennedy, a self-described average Joe. He was fired from a public school for silently praying after football games, but he took his fight to the U.S. Supreme Court and overturned more than 50 years of misguided rulings. Here's our own Christina Vidal with the making of an American hero.
Although Joe Kennedy had never coached a football team before, his years as a Marine had honed his leadership skills, forging him into a man who could motivate and encourage young men. Inspired by the film Facing the Giants, he began a quiet tradition, taking a knee at the end of each game to thank God. For Coach Kennedy, this simple act would be more than ritual. It was a heartfelt expression of gratitude to the Lord for saving his marriage.
So that was my covenant right there. And it was my commitment, which I didn't know where that was going to lead. I heard his calling. And let me tell you, I've never felt anything like that before. I couldn't wait to get off of work. I'd go into work at 5 a.m. so I could get off at 2 p.m. so I could go to be there at football practice. And that was my thing. Monday through Sunday was football. And that's all I did. I took care of those young men and just loved every single second of it. It was awesome. They got to do football. I got to do all the personal side of things. So if a kid was acting up, loses his mind, get fight with his parents, breaks up with his girlfriend, mom or dad's in jail, I mean, endless number of things. That was my department, and I really enjoyed that. And My wife and I, we had kids living in our house that were homeless, and we would take them home for the weekend, brush them off and feed them and clothe them and just love on them and just kind of get them through school.
Coach Kennedy's wife, Denise, was the head of human resources in the same school district.
And my wife was happy because I was starting to serve in our community again. I was helping these young men. I was part of her life at the school district. And we had 2 kids in the high school, 1 in the middle school. So it seemed like our family was Bremerton all of a sudden.
After every game, Coach Kennedy knelt at the 50-yard line, giving thanks to God for his players and all that unfolded on the field.
I do remember the first time the kids came and asked, they were like, "Coach, what are you doing out there?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just thanking God for what you did." And so they said, "Can we join?" And I thought, this is a free country, man. Of course you can. You guys can do whatever you want. And that was the first time I remember it.
For 8 seasons straight, Coach Joe Kennedy poured his heart into the lives of the young men at Bremerton High School.
My prayers were very raw, but they were just being so grateful of being part of this and to lift these guys up for what they did on the field. That's all it was. And this kind of grew and it grew and it grew. And before I knew it, I would grab both helmets, one from each team, and I would lift them up over the guys, and everybody would interlock arms, so everybody was one unit, and I would just lift them up and thank God for it. And it became something really cool.
He knows how to take boys and turn them into men and make them work as a team. And that's the role that Coach Kennedy filled on the Bremerton High School football team. He took kids, some of whom didn't have a dad and didn't have good fatherly figures in their lives, and turned them into men. And that's what he did until someone complimented the school district.
It was actually somebody came to our football game and saw what we were doing and was so impressed with it, called our principal and said, "Hey, I'm new to the school district, and in our district, I've never seen this, but at a public school to see people praying," he goes, "I want to tell you, that was awesome."
And the superintendent did what I guess all superintendents feel like they have to do. They investigated that compliment and realized that Coach Kennedy was taking a knee in silent prayer after his football games, and they said, "You know what? You can't do that. That violates the Establishment Clause of the Constitution. It's as if you're establishing a religion right there on the 50-yard line." And there's this other case called Lemon versus Kurtzman, that stands for the premise that you cannot engage in too much religious activity within the public sphere. And Coach Kennedy, being the obstinate Marine that he is, said, "Well, I don't think this sounds right."
Their lawyers gave me a letter, said I couldn't even talk to the school district anymore unless I had legal representation, and I felt lost. I was drowning. I didn't know what to do. And God put First Liberty Institute right into my life because I was drowning and I didn't know what my recourse was. I can't imagine if I didn't have legal representation. I would just been let go and case closed. I really just wanted to just work it all out like adults, and they ended up saying, well, just stop praying with the team and it shouldn't be a problem anymore. And that's where I had my big rub, because I was an American and a Marine before I was a Christian.
And so he gets out of the Marine Corps and expects that the freedoms that he fought and defended would be applied to him, especially this one, where you didn't have to shed your constitutional rights to walk through the schoolhouse gates. But what he found was something else entirely. Instead, he had a school district saying, look, you can pray, but you can't do it in sight of anybody else. You have to hide your faith.
As a Marine and an American, it didn't sit right with me. And when my team said to me, they said, "Coach, can't you just give in and do what the school says?" I knew at that exact second, nope, I could not.
After losing his job as a coach at Bremerton High School, Coach Joe Kennedy engaged in the biggest battle of his life, a legal battle that eventually landed his case in the Supreme Court.
I've been telling these guys from day one, do what is right, even if it's not popular, no matter what it costs you. And this was my opportunity to show them that this is real life. And they knew I was going to lose my job and not be their coach anymore because of something so simple as this prayer. They couldn't understand why it was so important.
We thought we'd send a letter to the school district, sort of explain the reality of how they could permit this to occur. And then 7 years later, we're still in litigation.
My wife and I almost got divorced over this whole thing. So this put everything and my faith to test, where the only thing I had left was my faith. And I was like, God, I'm just going to rely on you because I have nothing else.
In the case of Coach Kennedy's case, we worked as if it all depended upon us, but we trusted that God would provide a good outcome in this whole thing at the same time. And so there was a lot of labor that went into that case. And certainly it was tough on Coach Kennedy and his family.
Despite setbacks in lower courts, Coach Kennedy's resolve never wavered. Over 7 grueling years of litigation and more than 60 attorneys from First Liberty Institute rallied to his cause, fighting tirelessly to defend the religious freedom of this former Marine and to secure the rights of all Americans to express their faith. Their collective effort culminated in a landmark victory at the U.S. Supreme Court level.
We are more free today than we have been in our entire lifetime because a coach decided to stand for your religious freedom when he took a knee in silent prayer after his football game. We changed the course of religious history in our country because we were able to invalidate that test called the Lemon Test from Lemon versus Kurtzman back in the 1970s. Would we have the courage that Coach Kennedy had to go on and make that commitment and stay true to that commitment? Thankfully, it's easier to stand for that principle now because of Coach Kennedy. But his example, as much as the precedent that his case set, ought to serve as a reminder to us that we have a higher duty before God than we do even before men.
The significance of this victory at the Supreme Court level could overturn thousands of religious freedom cases lost in the past across the nation. Coach Kennedy's landmark victory has rendered the Lemon Test null and void. Over 8,000 cases stand to be reviewed and overturned, a huge step towards preserving our precious Constitution.
Man, I'm a train wreck like everybody else. I just listen to what God has called me to do. If an average guy like me could get called to change the religious landscape of the United States, imagine what he could do with you guys.
It was absolutely 100% worth it. There is nothing better than America and the Constitution.
There is much to celebrate in Coach Joe Kennedy's victory at the Supreme Court. His story reminds us that courageous Christians who take a stand against the attacks on their constitutional rights can and do make a difference. But Coach Joe's victory does not mean that we can become complacent. As you'll see in just a moment, it's more critical now than ever for Christians to become engaged in the public square.
May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. We see many times in scriptures that our God is a God of hope. He's not surprised by the issues we as Christians currently face, and by His power, He has given us the ability to remain hopeful in all circumstances.
I believe that if my daddy were here, for example, he would remind me, don't ever lose hope.
I think most people see all the attacks, all the darkness in the country, and it looks pretty bleak. And I wish I could pull everybody into my world, which is for 34 years, all I've done is religious freedoms cases. And I'm telling you, what's happening now, historic is an understatement. We are moving religious freedom in a positive direction with more force and speed than has ever happened in the country.
The United States of America truly is the last best hope for freedom for the world.
For the first 200 years of our nation, the Bible was the salt and light that was infused into our culture that made America the greatest nation in the history of the world.
Our founding fathers were so committed to these freedoms that many of them gave everything. The least we can do is preserve it for the next generation. You know, you never really own freedom. You only preserve it for the next generation.
The reality is that there is a canyon that cuts through American culture, unquestionably. It is a division between all those who believe that Judeo-Christian, Bible-based beliefs are absolutely indispensable to the survival of this nation. And on the other side, there are those who believe that Judeo-Christian, Bible-based values are destructive obstacles to what they call progress, hence progressivism.
One of the great challenges America faces is political, because we are such a polarized country, and as a result we certainly need to come back to biblical and constitutional ideas. And if we do not,
It isn't just the future of America, it's the future of the world.
Christians, we not only have a responsibility, but it's more than that. We have a duty to vote, pray, and take action. And we live in a constitutional republic where we can actually make a difference. And I know it's easy to look at Washington, D.C. and think all hope is lost and get frustrated, but we can be involved at the local level and make radical, restorative, redemptive changes from the bottom up.
We need to be instilling confidence in our people and realize that at the end of the day, Jesus has called us to be faithful. And come what may, we're called to honor Him in our lives and to be faithful.
I am very optimistic. I'm always an optimistic person, but I'm more optimistic now than I ever have been in a lot of different ways, not only with regards to what's happening in the court system, with regards to religious freedom, but elections matter, and we have seen a sea change from a dark winter, if you will, under the Biden administration to where we are now. And I am very optimistic. What I want to caution people about is we need to not miss this opportunity. This is an incredible opportunity. It's historic, and we need to take advantage of it for lasting generations.
We've got duties and privileges under this Constitution and this form of government that afford us the freedom to be able to be people of faith in public. Don't be afraid of that.
We have to speak truth, fight for what is right, at any cost. Christ laid down His life for our salvation. We must lay down our life for His Great Commission and for the moral truth that America uniquely was founded upon.
What a blessing and what an inheritance we have. And it's really the grace of God on our country that we have this beautiful inheritance of the First Amendment and the U.S. Constitution, which safeguards rights which are fundamental to our own human dignity, but more importantly, to protect our obligations to God, to protect our ability to discharge and fulfill our obligation to God, to worship Him in spirit and in truth.
Just continue to realize that Jesus Christ has already won. Proclaim that victory. Walk in that victory.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Kennedy Cassidy. As Psalm 33 declares, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." The founding fathers who established our government knew that if we ignored God, the nation would fail. And yet today, God has been driven out of our government, out of our schools, and out of our public life. Thankfully, that's beginning to change. But the battle is far from won, and Washington, D.C. writer and commentator Robert Knight gives you a blueprint for the restoration of constitutional governance in his prescriptive book, A Strong Constitution. What would America look like if we followed the law? We want to send it to you as thanks for your generous gift to the ongoing work of this ministry. My dad, D. James Kennedy, founded Coral Ridge Ministries to broadcast the gospel and God's design for all of life as widely as possible. And today, with your help, we're able to continue that mission and expand it in ways he never dreamed of, using podcasts, social media, streaming video, and special documentary presentations like Attack on the Constitution. If you have enjoyed today's program, which we shared just a portion, there's much more to see in the full documentary available on DVD or via streaming. If you're able to give a gift of $60 or more, we'll send you our high-impact new documentary, Attack on the Constitution, along with the book, A Strong Constitution. We are at a watershed moment in America right now. The tide is beginning to turn, and that's why the nation needs this trusted biblical ministry proclaiming hope and guidance from God's Word on these issues we face. I want to ask you to come alongside us and help us to do this vital work. Simply go online now at crm.tv or write to us at Coral Ridge Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida 33339, or call toll-free 877-962-7677.
Here in America, we've been entrusted with an extraordinary gift. Our rights come from God, not the government. And by God's providence, our founders recognized that truth and built a constitution to protect those God-given freedoms. But over the years, we've watched those foundations erode. by judicial overreach, political agendas, and cultural confusion. Still, I believe we're witnessing a renewal. A new generation is rising to stand for truth, for liberty, and for the Constitution once again. Look at what just happened in just the last few weeks as a result of the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk, easily one of our nation's most talented and influential Christian leaders. What Satan meant for evil, I firmly believe that God will use it for good. We are seeing the next generation rise up in a remarkable way. Charlie's murder reminds us that standing for truth isn't without risk. Charlie was boldly exercising those freedoms given to him by his Creator, and his life was taken. We pray that justice will be done, but Charlie's hope wasn't in this world. Just 3 days before his death, he posted these words, "Jesus defeated death so you can live." That was his testimony, and that truth can never be silenced. Friends, the resurrection of Jesus Christ means death never has the final word. That hope, it gives us courage. Courage to speak truth, to defend what's right, to live with conviction. Romans 12 tells us, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Let's honor Charlie's legacy by living out that truth. Let's be bold in faith and unwavering in our pursuit of righteousness. Please, continue to pray for Erica Kirk and their children, that they would find peace, comfort, and strength in Christ alone. Coral Ridge Ministries is contending for the faith and proclaiming hope to the nation. If you're ever in South Florida, we welcome you to join us for Sunday morning worship right here at Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church, or you can always join us via live stream at crpc.tv. We also want to invite you to connect with us on social media at Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And be sure to check out our streaming content at watch.crm.tv. I want to thank you so much for joining us. And now, here's a look at the next Truths That Transform.
What Charlie did in his evolution of going from free markets to talking and proclaiming the truth of the gospel, I think it was a natural evolution, right? And so today, yes, you see people who, they hate God's design, and that is why they hated Charlie Kirk.
That's next week. This has been a production of Coral Ridge Ministries.